Now with Erin Covey of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter, we are moving on to the 10th Congressional District, which covers most of South Central Pennsylvania. Happens to be where I live and am coming to you from today in the podcast. And that seat is represented by Scott Perry, who has been a congressman and a state representative for a long time. This is a rematch with Janelle Stelson, a former TV broadcaster in the Harrisburg TV market. She won a contested six-way primary 2 years ago, won a semi-contested two-way primary this year, and is now the nominee again. So this district is all within the Harrisburg media market. It's another one media market district. It's all of Dauphin County, where I am today, and excuse me, my phone's ringing. It is all of Dauphin County, where I am today, most of Cumberland, and about half of York County. So I am fascinated by rematch elections where the same people go up again cycle after cycle. So give us your take on PA-10, Erin.
Yeah, so PA-10, this was among the closest House races in the country last cycle. Stelson came just a point away from defeating Scott Perry, which, this was a race that at the beginning of the 2024 cycle did not look quite as competitive. We had it rated likely Republican, and then over time it shifted to lean Republican. And then to toss up as it became increasingly clear how vulnerable Scott Perry is. So this is just a district that voted for Trump by about 5 points in 2024. I would say compared to the 7th and certainly the 8th district, the trend lines here in this part of the state are much better for Democrats. And, Scott Perry, Democrats have tried to take him out previously, have been unsuccessful in the past. And, there's a lot of fodder that you can go after with him. And so he's always a bit of a tempting target for Democrats. Because he's the former chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, there are a number of federal spending bills where he's been the only member of the Pennsylvania delegation to vote against them. And so that just gives Democrats a lot of material to work with. But Stelson's really the first who has been able to really force him on defense. And that is in part due to her really strong fundraising, and in part because of the fact that she was one of the a handful of candidates from last cycle who came back for a rematch this cycle. She was able to raise a lot of money last year, which put her in a stronger position than most other Democratic challengers, even folks like Cognetti. And so Stelson's fundraising is certainly one of the reasons that she's able to put this in play. And then, of course, because she was on TV as a news anchor for so long, she also had a little bit of a brand in the district that wasn't defined by partisan politics. So that helped her as well. So I think this is going to be, yet again, a hyper competitive race. I think just by nature of the margin last cycle, there was never any doubt in my mind that this wouldn't be a toss-up. So
Scott Perry took 50.63% of the vote last time. Trump got 52. Shapiro got 55 in 2022. The voter registration is 45.5% R, 36.5% D, and 18% independent. And in your estimation, do you think Stelson could have won in 2024 if she actually lived in the district?
Maybe. That was the main knock against her. Yeah. And I
think it was an unforced error.
Yeah. And I think, that it was that. And then there were some comments that she had made on air years ago that had drawn some national attention that were the main lines of attack against her from Republicans, and then, of course, just kind of tying her to all the generic, unpopular Democratic brand issues. But yeah, could have made the difference. I think ultimately the fact that it was that close at all shows that it wasn't a dominating issue for voters, but it certainly could have made the difference given the margin there.
So I think part of her problem was not just that she didn't live in the district and thus could not vote for herself. She was asking other people to vote for her to do something she couldn't do. It's also she fumbled the answer. In a primary debate, she was like, I'll move into the district if I win the primary. And before that, she had said, I'll move in if I decide to run. She only lived 9 miles from the district. She is divorced. She does not have children. So I always wondered what the big obstacle was to her renting an apartment 9.5 miles away from her house. In Pennsylvania, in the primary, in a district that cuts across multiple counties like this one does, underneath your name, your county is listed. So she was on the ballot in 2024 in the primary, Janelle Stelson, Lancaster, which is in the 11th district where Lloyd Smucker is. So since then, last summer, she moved into the district, into the Cumberland County portion of the district. And she has pointedly and publicly declined to debate who was her primary opponent, Dauphin County Commissioner Justin Douglas. So I'll be curious to see if she now calls on Scott Perry to debate and whether he parries her own response back to her. My estimation is her being a former TV anchor saved them $2 million in TV ads, having to up her name ID among the folks in the 10th district.
I think that sounds about right. And I think Perry has also never been a strong fundraiser. And so I think that immediately made this a more attractive target opportunity for Democrats than it would have been otherwise. And, you saw Republican outside groups were also kind of slow to get involved for Perry, which I think is also just evidence of the fact that because he is in the Freedom Caucus, he doesn't have as many allies within House Republican leadership. So he's not one of their incumbents, like someone like a McKenzie who they would want to spend a lot of money for necessarily. So, they have to spend money for all their vulnerable incumbents. But I do think
part
that
of it is, I think part of it is people look at him and say, he's not the most prodigious fundraiser, and yet he still wins. So does he need our outside help?
That too.
Because the Democrats keep throwing up, opponents, and he keeps kind of not raising a lot of money and then beating them. I think Scott Perry is a very internally motivated guy. I don't really know him well at all, but he marches to the tune of his own drummer. Some people appreciate that, and some people do not. When people complain about politicians being weather vanes, my example to them of the opposite is Scott Perry, and then you still don't like him either. So, pick your poison. Again, this is a one media market district, so you only have to feed, the TV machine at 3 or 4 stations when you do that sort of stuff. I have never been impressed with Janelle Stelson as a candidate. She was obviously a good broadcaster because she was around for a long time, more than I think 35-ish years. But she did not, to me, come off as an adroit campaigner last time. Maybe she's learned more now because it's something you learn, you get better at as you do more of it. But for a minute, tell us about the prospects of repeat challengers, regardless of party or gender or geography. How do repeat challengers tend to do, Erin?
Yeah, what we've seen over the years is it's a pretty mixed record for repeat challengers. I think they do start out with an edge that they would not have otherwise if they had not run the cycle before. And that's both in fundraising because they have relationships with donors from last cycle, but also there tends to be a bit of deference from the party to them, even if, the national party infrastructure isn't a huge fan of the previous nominee. If they're interested in running again, they're usually going to defer a little bit to them and want to work to, if they didn't run the strongest campaign last cycle, they will make an effort to try to improve that this time around. And then, of course, once you've run twice, then you start to hit diminishing returns. If you run a third time and lose, you risk ending up in perennial candidate territory. But that second time tends to be, I would say, the best window where you have the experience and the relationships from your first race, but you don't have the kind of stench of being a loser at that point.
So I would be remiss if I did not note that last year, 2025, in our off-year local and county elections, the Democrats did very well in the suburban strip that runs along Cumberland County in through Dauphin County. So the greater Harrisburg metropolitan area, they picked up a couple seats in Cumberland County that they had never controlled before, some row office things. So the Democrats here think they have the wind at their back.
Yeah, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Cumberland County was one of the few counties that shifted left between 2020 and 2024 at the presidential level versus most of the state shifted right as the country did.
Yeah, so the belief here, well, not the belief, but the York County portion of this district has always been a Perry stronghold. When the Democratic-led state Supreme Court back in 2018 took it upon themselves to just decide to become map drawers. That was one of the first big decisions they made, was to cut up York County and create a district that had York City, Harrisburg, and Carlisle together, which had never really been the case here in this part of the state. So a lot of people don't realize that only a bit more than half of York County voters are in the 10th. That is the most conservative part of the district. It's the most Republican part overall. It's where Perry's from, northern York County. So that's really his stronghold. So the question now, Dauphin County is a majority Democratic candidate. That's how it's voting. So if you expect to come out of Dauphin County down and Cumberland County gets worse for you, can you find more votes in York County to make up for that? At least that's how I'm starting to look at this. Secondly, do all the attacks on Stelson that they're going to run again have as much impact as they did the first time? And will all the attacks they run against Perry for the second, third, or fifth time, will they have any impact too? I kind of feel like we're not going to learn a whole lot new about these candidates in this race. It's going to be kind of a slugfest that just kind of took a pause from November of 24 till now.
I think that's definitely right. I think I can't think of any other potential lines of attack that Democrats have not already tried to throw at Scott Perry. I think, we saw they focused a little bit less on the kind of 2020 presidential record that Perry had in terms of his involvement with trying to help Trump overturn those results. And they were a bit more focused on his record on federal spending bills, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, I don't know if there's much more fodder to glean there.
Because the TV ad you do against Scott Perry for not voting for a spending bill is the same one you could have run since his first reelection, because that's kind of who he is. He's an unreconstructed House Freedom Caucus type guy. And one of the reasons he gets good ratings from all the alphabet soup groups that rate government spending is because he thinks there's too much of it and he votes against it. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Do you surprise us? Do you also have this race listed as a toss-up?
We do.
So 3 toss-ups in a row here.
3, yes. And there's no other state that has 3 toss-ups at this point, which is why I wrote that Pennsylvania, more so than any other state, could determine control of the House in November, just by nature of those districts. And then, of course, the first district, which I know we're going to talk about as well, that one we still have favoring Republicans.
Don't get there yet, Erin. Don't get there. Okay. Don't get there yet. We're going to get there in a minute. So to wrap up Pennsylvania 10, I think it's going to be just a continuation of the slugfest from last time. You folks at Cook Political Report have it rated as toss-up, the third toss-up in the state. And apparently we're the only state that has 3 toss-ups. And I will just note for the record that literally the day after the primary, Wednesday, Stelson was in front of her favorite gas station for like her 4th press conference going after Scott Perry. And she had put out the advisory about that press conference before Election Day. So I think that showed you where she was.
Yeah, 17th district, which we have rated solid Democrat this cycle. That's Chris DeLuzio's seat in the Pittsburgh suburbs. That's a seat that in a presidential cycle or in a midterm that's favorable for Republicans certainly could come online, but this cycle we don't see that one as competitive. So it's not really on the board at all. But yes, Democrats have more offensive opportunities in Pennsylvania than they have in any other state, including places like California and Texas right now. So I think it'll yet again be the center of the battleground, as it often is, both in presidential and midterm cycles.
As I tell folks, look, if you're bored with Pennsylvania politics, wait 6 months, because it changes. So anyway, Erin Covey, Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. Thanks you so much for your time and your expertise, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.